My name is Chris McCarthy, and I'm the Executive Director of the Provincetown Art Association and Museum. And this is the Freddie Schiff-Levin Lecture Series, started in honor of the artist Freddie Schiff-Levin. And we're grateful for Tony and John Levin and Herbert Lee, who fund this program for us. And this program centers around lectures that focus on the exhibitions that are up in the museums. And we're fortunate this year to have Anne Peretz, Truro and Cambridge-based artist who has been painting on the Cape for 40 years and is this year's Director's Choice. And one of the, I guess, challenges that worked out to our advantage is that Anne doesn't only paint paintings of Cape Cod, she paints other images around the world. And we decided that in order to really give Anne a show she deserved, we would break it up into two pieces. So the exhibition that's on view now is the paintings that she's done on Cape Cod, and the exhibition that will open next June focuses on the paintings that she's done everywhere else. And the catalog that we've done encompasses both exhibitions, but the exhibition that we have now primarily looks at Cape Cod. So I'll start a little bit about Anne's background and where she started in order to get to where she is today. And Anne was fortunate enough that at the age of 12 she was able to go to Paris with her grandfather, and at age 14 she started studying with André Lehaut. She really loved being in Paris. She was there for a couple of years painting the Seine, painting all of her surroundings, and then unfortunately her parents made her go back to the States so that she could finish school. While she attended Smith College for her undergraduate degree, she studied with Mervyn Jules, who also was very involved with PAAM, a past president and artist that exhibited here and is also represented in our collection. And further, she studied both drawing and woodcut with Leonard Baskin. And ironically, the piece on the right is an Israeli picture, and part of the Around the World series that we'll be showing next year does focus quite a bit on paintings that Anne did in Israel. I think this is more coincidental than anything else, but it's interesting that I was able to find this image of the work by Baskin. She also studied in the New York School in New York with Moses Sawyer, another Provincetown artist, and Anthony Tony. Sawyer's work is on the left, Tony's work is on the right. None of the work that Anne does really resembles any of these painters that she studied with. Cezanne was an artist that she absolutely adored and was one of the inspirational figures in her career, but she took what she learned from these teachers and applied her own style of painting, which focused on very, very large-scale work, because if you know Anne, she's quite petite, but she's able to move and paint these very, very giant canvases, which are 120 by 63 inches or something like that. And she uses a lot of paint. She uses sand that's incorporated in the paint. So she has really created her own style throughout her career. Anne, like I said, has spent 40 years on Cape Cod, and a lot of what she focuses on are her natural surroundings. her house is perched on a hill in Truro, and her window, looking out her window, is primarily the dunes, the seashore, ponds, places that are very familiar to her, that she spends a lot of time in. And it's not like these images have a happy feel as to, oh, let's go to the beach. They present more of an image of turbulence, looking at the erosion of the dunes, looking at the environment, as opposed to something that's pretty and picture perfect. She's completely focusing on other aspects of her surroundings and thinking about where they're going to be in the next 20 years. Similar to Monet, Anne will paint the same picture at different times of the day and different times with utilizing different light. This is her picture of Horseleech Pond in Wellfleet, and you can see 5 different versions, one in the evening, one in the morning, one during the rain, one in the afternoon, so that it's exactly the same place, but you're looking at how the light affects each during the time is affected differently. And Anne loves to swim in these ponds as well, so if you almost think about her perspective being in the water looking at this image as opposed to painting these in her studio. And typically what Anne will do is she'll either do a sketch outdoors, or she'll photograph the actual place and go back into her studio and create the image, mostly from memory, and definitely taking artistic license in terms of how she creates the actual image. But the horse leech pond ones are particularly beautiful. They use a lot of orange, which typically is not one of Anne's colors. She doesn't really use blue and greens either. She sticks with a lot of more neutral, earthy tones, ochres, browns, yellows, things like that. Here's some more images of the dunes, and as we discussed a little bit earlier, you're looking at more motion, you're looking at more turbulence, looking at the brooding sky, like it looks like it's about to pour rain in the bottom part, and the piece that's up on the top is actually a little bit unusual in terms of the sky, that very bright blue sky with the bright blue sea. That's typically not what Anne focuses on. She's looking more at like the sky, which is in the lower picture, of the clouds that look like they're about to open up and pour. But if you can see a lot of movement and motion in the painting, looking at the dunes, the grass almost looks like it's swaying back and forth. The sand almost looks like it's kind of tumbling down the hill a little bit. But this is really what Anne has been doing for more years than not, is focusing on how her environment has been affected. The other thing that Anne has done in her paintings is focus on things that are no longer. She's found herself walking along the beach many times and looking at these pilings that once supported piers that are no longer there. And not only are the piers not there anymore, eventually the pilings are not either. So she's done a whole series of pilings that are featured in the exhibition, one of which belongs to the collection at PAAM. And the big piece that's in the front of the gallery that you see looking in was a piece that was in Anne's studio that has never been exhibited in a gallery or museum space before. So we're really happy that we were able to get these paintings to see, again, this type of imagery that is preserving something that no longer exists. Preservation through painting of the piers of the dunes is something that you'll see recurring in Anne's work over and over again. These are a couple of Provincetown studies and sketches. She has worked in smaller size. We have a few that are 12 by 12 and a few that are 24 by 24, but a lot of the times Anne works within a very square format. Some are rectangular, but a square you'll see is a really common theme. And even though we know that the dunes aren't square and they go on and on and on, within a square she can really create this sense of depth and three-dimensionality that makes you just want to keep walking and walking and walking into the water and around out to Herring Cove or wherever you want to go. But the idea that when you look at these pieces too, that you can see these moving, these reeds, you can see the water moving along through the dunes, that this idea of motion is very, very prominent. And again, these skies that have so much texture created with the palette knife to make them, like, I know that people want to touch these, but we have cameras upstairs, so I'll catch anybody who does that. So now that's basically a little bit of the Cape Cod series, and I'm being brief because I really want, and which I'm sure you do too, is to let Anne tell you about them and why she did them and explain them a little bit more. But I just want to give you a little bit of a preview of some of what the other paintings are going to be next year. And this one was, again, of particular interest because it's kind of similar to that piling painting with the little house on it, that it has this little house. There's actually letters in the sign here and a boat, so you know that there is some kind of human presence happening, but they don't need to be in the picture. And this is just an incredible piece. I love this picture, and again, when I went to Anne's house, these were the first two paintings that I saw, and other than the ones that I had seen of Cape Cod. And when I saw these two paintings, especially this one, I just couldn't get it out of my head, and I'm like, we have to figure out a way on how we're going to show these. These are a couple of the rice paddy paintings in Vietnam, and in Anne's earlier life, in 1962, she had actually been in the Philippines and had been witness to some of the violence that was occurring in these rice paddies. So the idea of making them dark and brooding and using lots of browns and blacks it was done on purpose. But at the same time, she's got these incredible lines that not only create rectangles and triangles and squares, it has this incredible depth that just pulls you back. And then there's this little object here of these three sticks with this reddish, and what is this reddish thing? It's a little flag, but this just pops right out at you where you just can't, your eye just keeps coming back to it and then just keeps being carried right through the canvas. So these are just absolutely incredible, and there was no way that I could do this exhibition without including this series of work, because it takes you on all these different travels with Anne, and that's how I felt every time I was with her, that I was going on a different excursion. I was going to Greece or Italy or Vietnam or Israel, and she spends time in another country or another place painting almost every year. Excuse me. So she's got this incredible array of places and paintings, and from very early ones of little still lifes in Spain to these beautiful quarries. And it just really, they're absolutely stunning. And again, even though they don't paint like this pretty feel-good picture, there's something so dramatic about them that you can't stop looking and you just want to keep seeing more. These are a couple of images of Jaffa, and when I did see this one for the first time, it made me think of Curator, the very starkness of it, these kind of arcs and shapes that keep mimicking each other throughout the piece. And again, this crazy, dark, brooding sky, but the starkness of this area here, but that little horizon line in the back. So there's a lot of the same elements as the Cape Cod paintings, but obviously different subject. And then the rooftops here, another subject that I really love are rooftops. I love Provincetown rooftops, but I love this one too, because it's got this little red this railing that happens to go around the street here, which just pops right out. But the little doors and windows creating all kinds of shapes and of arcs and circles and squares, and there's just an incredible use of geometry within this work, and these two are just incredible paintings. This is a painting of Jerusalem, and you have these two towns here, but the towns almost become secondary to this incredible line that takes you from here all the way down, and then you see these trees. Anne does paint incredible trees, I will tell you that. And these trees that have this linear movement just take you all around the canvas, and then again, this horizon line, you're looking at these works that just, they just suck you right in. I don't know how else to describe it, but that's what happened to me when I just kept looking at this work. This is another image of Israel, and this reminded me a lot of the dune paintings, but at the same time, there's different, there's much more trees and the white shapes and again, this kind of pinkish horizon line that goes to the back. And then these are there's a couple of Spain paintings, and there are lots more. I'm just going to show you a few so that you'll have to come back next year and see the rest of them. But this particular quarry has so many levels of planes and lines that go through, and the way that she has made these hot spots, almost like the sun just beating down on these pictures, but then this really beautiful kind of framing with the trees up here and down there, and then you have this shape here, and then these little almost like pilings down. But this is a very large painting, and I think most of you know who Anne is. Anne is a very petite woman, and she paints these giant paintings, and I was overwhelmed by how huge, and she can move them by herself too, which is pretty incredible as well. You wouldn't find that out in the catalog. But anyhow, we really had a really incredible time looking at these pieces and going through what we were going to pick. That was probably one of the hardest pieces of the entire project, was deciding what was actually going to be in the show. And so when we walk through the exhibition, you'll see that we've grouped some things together based on the subject matter. We've grouped some things based on color combinations, textural and design compositions, but overall we wanted to give a really good overview of the places that Anne loves and the places that she likes to be, and what really moves her to paint these paintings. Hopefully next year she'll take me to Spain so that I can see these firsthand, and so that I'll be better prepared for my talk next year, right, Anne? I'm just kidding. But at any rate, these are the kind of works that you'll be able to see, and the catalog does include a lot of the images from next year's show too. So we were able to do one catalog for both exhibitions, which is really nice. And the show will open in June next year, and it's going to be in the big Hoffman Gallery this way behind me. And so that's basically my portion of the talk, and because I really want you to be able to talk to Anne, ask her questions, and we can walk through and really look at how the show is laid out and let her give you her perspective on why she does what she does. And, oh yeah, I'm sorry, this is the last one. This is one of the signature pieces for next year, are the trees. And this is another picture from Spain that has these incredible trunks. I mean, she paints them just so large that you feel like you can reach out and grab part of these trees or walk through this forest and look at these. These bases are just so dramatic and monstrous, but again, a way of looking at another area from her perspective. And that's why I feel like my work with Anne has taken me on an around the world tour, even though we've only stayed in Massachusetts. But overall, it's been this wonderful experience, and I really want you to hear Anne and listen to her talk to you about her work. So thank you for my portion, and now we'll move into the other space. Anne, does anybody want to open with a question for Anne, or do you want to, how do we want to, does anybody want to start, or do you just want to start talking, Anne? How much someone asks?
Yeah, how do you decide what you paint before you start?
How do I decide what I'm painting? Well, it's a very good question, and you know, I'm always just looking around for a motif that strikes me. And this one actually is a kind of good picture to talk about that question, because this I actually saw from lying on my bed, looking out the window at 3 windows, and it was moonlight. I woke up in the middle of the night, and bright moonlight was lighting the dune. And of course you can't turn the light on and paint your painting in the moonlight. So I kept rushing. I had little pieces of paper, and I would, you know, make a little line, and then I would write a note on it what the color was, because I couldn't actually put a color on it. So I just had lots of writing of sort of, whatever, the colors that I thought should go with it. Anyway, but I'm just always looking for something that appeals, put a frame around it. Megan?
This might seem like a really silly question, but when you say you write the names of the colors down, what are those names?
Oh.
Like greens or?
Well, like this, I would put ochre, and then I would put sort of whitish yellow, and then I would put this would be burnt raw umber, and a green, different kind of greens, and then I would describe whether they were lighter or darker than something. Sometimes I would describe it by putting more or less lines. So if it's dark, I would put several lines like that, and if it's lighter, so it's a little language. But normally I don't put the writing, but when I couldn't turn on the light and I couldn't use paint, so I was just putting down words. But
you paint small studies before you paint a large painting, or how do you go about it?
Not usually, but sometimes, like that little painting there is a study for that painting over there, and a few others. I mean, I use that painting as a sort of prototype for a couple of other paintings as well, but I don't generally do small and then large. Although, well, I mean, for instance, the big Spain quarries, I did small ones outside, and then they were the studies for the big ones. So yes, I do sometimes.
So do you typically paint plein air, or you?
No, I do some, but mostly I actually do a series of photographs as the sort of first cut. I like looking through the camera lens to that kind of gives me the sense of the composition, and then I do several photographs that are different distances. So I go I zoom and I go out and in, and then I usually end up with about 20 photographs that I pin up on the wall, and I use them mostly as my sketch.
Do you paint? Do you not paint at certain times and paint? Is there any regularity to the way you do? Because after 40 years, I'm sure do you find you have a way of working? Are you constantly on to paint, or are there times when you just go into a resting period and then go back?
Oh, it's a good question. Yeah, there are many resting periods. I also have a sort of second life, which is running a mental health clinic in Boston. So that takes up quite a bit of time. And so I sort of, I mean, mostly my painting takes place between May and October, and then sort of, but not consistently even during then. And then I take sort of 10-day periods and come out here to my studio during the year. And but I'm not very good at being consistent. I should be, but.
What is the relationship, if any, between the mental health work and your painting work?
Not a lot. I mean, I guess, in other words, people have said, why don't you do art therapy? And I'm mortified by that idea. No interest in that at all. I guess sometimes I've had this image that in the mental health world, sometimes you're helping people sort of keep their head above water. And in the painting world, you're really trying to make something really expand and happen once you're out of the water. And so maybe that's relevant to my swimming across the pond with my head just barely out of the water, which is probably not the way I feel a lot of time painting. But I wouldn't say there is a direct. I think it's quite separate.
And I see your art as very abstract. Do you like abstract art, number one question. Number two, have you studied Helen Frankenthaler at all? And Morris Lewis? When I was walking by, my immediate reaction was, oh, it's almost a Morris Lewis island.
Wow.
Of the veil paintings.
Yeah, certainly Frankenthaler. I love Helen Frankenthaler. I wouldn't have thought of Morris Lewis. Kiefer is someone who certainly on this painting, that I think you get a sense of Kiefer has been a big influence on me at times. Yes, I do like abstract painting, some abstract painting, you know, but and I am always trying to move my painting to an abstract place while still maintaining a sense of place and landscape and not making it too geometric or too simplified or too boring. And it's really a struggle to, you know, how abstract can you be and still have something to say that looks like a landscape. But when I found those pilings, I thought, oh my God, this is the greatest image, because they are an abstraction just in their natural state. And you know, so that was fun to play with that, because it really is such an abstract shape by itself. But no, that is take a look at these two paintings here. They both are the same subject, and they're both pretty abstract. That one I did first about 2 years ago, I think. I can't remember how long. And this is, I think I called it a falling doom, but it is, and it's those dark chunks are parts of the part of the bank, or the top of the bank, that fall off, you know, when a storm comes, and so a whole bunch of living bushes and whatever start toppling down the side of the dune. So that was an effort to make that an abstract painting, and it sort of is, I think. But there I'm using palette knife and sand and cutting into it a little bit with a knife and stuff like that. But here I'm trying to go more abstract, and I'm trying to go looser with the brush. So this one has almost no palette knife on it, and I'm trying to really make that an abstract painting. And I don't know which is more abstract. I think maybe this one is, but anyway, I'm always playing around with how to be abstract and still try to stick with the topic.
Hold on to the representation.
Yeah.
It's almost a field painting too.
What?
It's almost like a field painting.
Yeah. So I don't know whether anyone has other questions or.
Can you talk a little about the pilings paintings and where that idea came from and how you've experimented with it?
Well, it came about because I was just walking on the beaches in Provincetown. It must be 5-6 years ago now, And I came upon this pile of pilings that were so incredibly dramatic, and they were just there. And so I got fascinated when I photographed them extensively, and then came back and did some drawings. And then I began looking at other pilings that were holding up piers and stuff, so that the one in the other room there with the little house on the top was still a pier. It no longer exists. It used to be, I think it wasn't Macmillan Wharf, but the one opposite it that now has the, I can't even quite figure out where it was, but it was down there someplace. And then the next season, it was gone. And so then I really got this passion for looking for pilings everywhere. And I actually have a painting that I'm hoping will be done for next summer. I hope I can finish it. It's in New York, and it's in the Hudson River, and it's pilings in the Hudson River with New Jersey across. So, what? Yeah, I'll finish that, because it. But I just have this. I do, for some reason, have this passion for this subject matter, and I'm, so unhappy that they've gone, because they were so amazing, and I cherish my paintings.
What influences the more maybe gray or darker colors as you're using brighter colors? What influences your...
Well, like I said, I'm a landscape painter, and I don't like blue and green generally. It's kind of hard with sky and grass and all. But I don't know. It's just, this is my preferred palette. It feels natural to me. It has the kind of possibility. I mean, I do tend to paint a kind of somber landscape, a kind of things that are disappearing, strong weather conditions, things like that. So they tend to get kind of black and white and gray and and brown. So that's been always a kind of my natural tendency. And then I think with this one, I just thought, I'm just going to try big blue sky. See what happens.
Can I ask a question before we're past the pilings? I never asked you this before, but that painting, the way the pilings are arrayed there, it's almost like a group of tribal elders, or even something totemic like Easter Island. Yeah. Were you going for that?
Sort of, yes. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think Anthropoid is the word. I looked that up one day. I think it's Anthropoid. But I really did get the feeling that they were people, like, and they're relating to each other and stuff. So I was really paying attention to that, and getting them all to talk and to relate to each other and to lean up against each other or lean away from each other or whatever. But I did think of them that way. Yeah, maybe.
And how true are you to the photograph, and what kind of artistic license do you take?
Oh, lots. Lots. No, I don't think, I mean, I know it's a really tacky thing to use photographs to paint paintings, but I use so many of them in one painting that there's, you never, I mean, once in a while there's just one or two paintings. And that's like that Vietnam painting of the boat. Yeah. I was only there for a short amount of time, and I saw this, and I wanted to do it. And it was night, and I took a couple of photographs, but I had the worst time trying to make out, what the composition was there. I just couldn't see it on the photograph, and it was complicated. But I generally do not do that. I mean, that was very unusual. So it's an impressionistic thing, and it helps me get the edges. Like when I'm out painting outdoors, I always take a camera with me so that I can line up the edges, so I know because otherwise it just goes all over the place.
8 feet long instead of 6.
What?
So they'll be 8 feet long instead of 6.
Right. So.
Are your smaller paintings, any of them completed on site or all from sketches?
Some of them are almost completed on site. I mean, sometimes they're absolutely completed, but I usually bring them into the studio and sort of mess with them a little bit. But some of these, that yellow one there, and then there are a couple on the other wall that we came through. There are some of the small ones. The very small ones, I think I did them pretty much on site, even though they're quite abstract. Any other questions?
I think I really have a question. It's just that what I noticed myself, what I really admire about the way you create these paintings is your edges or your lack of them. The fact that even though you're abstract, there's still a very sculptural quality to some of them, like the rocks, and you really do feel a combination of movement as I go into that painting or into this one. You've got a palette that's almost very even, and yet each piling has, it is pushing and pulling, and you feel the roundness of them, and they really do have the spatial quality. So as I look at them, I feel you have a very, strong feeling of depth, even though you've got abstraction going at the same time.
Thank you.
Just wonderful work.
Well, Cezanne is really the, I mean, there are other influences here, but I would say if I had to name one person who really is my guiding light, it's Cezanne, and, his ability to do the three-dimensional, two-dimensional thing, and I'm always coming back to Cezanne in pretty much every painting.
Did you have any new insights when you saw this all together about yourself as a painter?
That's an interesting. That's an interesting question. Did someone answer yes? I did. What was it? Do you remember?
Yeah, well, I mean, when we were laying them out, especially the big ones, I mean, when you have big paintings like this in a small studio, you can't step back. Like I said with this one, it's up in her loft. If she stepped back, she'd fall onto the ground. So when we actually stepped back and looked at like the piling painting in juxtaposition to the triptych back there, talk about depth. I mean, that's what I think a lot, just from my opinion of us being in here and moving paintings around, is that you really got to stand back and look at them from a distance, from another room, from another space. Because when I lay out a show, I like to see, when you walk in the door, what's the first thing you're going to see? When you're in here, what are you going to see back there? If you come in from that way, what are you going to see? And I think that just from our conversations, being able to step back, especially from the big paintings, and look at them in a place that has light. The lighting was a big deal too, of looking at how like the light reflects, especially on the dune painting, the hotter spots that Anne created through her use of color. I think it gave it a whole different hue than normally when you see it in a studio that has a lot of natural light or artificial light. I mean, that was one of the things, but you go ahead and answer.
Well, no, I think that's good. I mean, I felt good about seeing it. It does feel good to see your paintings up on a wall and, in a reasonable place and all together. So it makes me happy. And every time I've had a show, I mean, I can get so anxious about certain kinds of things, but I've never gotten anxious about my shows for some reason. I just put them up there and think, wow, that really is better than I thought. So it's always been a good experience for me. But I don't know that I have a different notion of myself as a painter, but it is kind of reassuring. It makes me feel like I can go back and do some more, maybe, hopefully. So.
I think the paintings complement the room, and the room complement the paintings also.
Yeah.
Your ceiling, your floors, and the walls.
Yes, it is. It's a wonderful space.
Christine did a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, she sure did.
We did it together.
You did it together. Yeah, it really looks beautiful.
Good.
So
Well, thank you.
Do you work completely on one painting until it's completed, or do you like stop and go back to it?
No, I work on a lot of different things at once. A lot of different things at once. I always feel a little guilty about it because I remember when I was in college and I was reading Delacroix's journals, and at one point Delacroix says, if you ever attempted to paint on more than one painting at a time, you should not paint at all. You don't have the passion to do it. And it always goes through my head. I never forget it. Because I really thought this was, oh yes, this is right, this is a passionate painter, and I just loved it. But it's not true for me, in fact.
Yeah, she thinks she can take some of these and rework them. We're not going to have that. They have to stay right here.
Do you have another geography you want to go to?
Sorry?
Another geography, another place?
A new place, you mean? Yeah. Am I going to? I don't have one in mind.
But New York, have you done any of New York paintings?
No, I haven't really. So maybe that's a new geography. Yeah, I mean, That painting has a funny kind of 9/11 feeling about it, even though, I mean, I don't know, I noticed that when I was painting it, and then people walk by and say, whoa, that's a 9/11 painting, but it's nothing to do with the buildings or anything, but it is these raw things sticking out of the water, and they're black, and, you know, so maybe New York will be. Yep.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Thank you very much, Anne.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Now you can enjoy the fabulous cheese platter.